Hi, this is Jill. Welcome to the Life After podcast, where we talk about moving from surviving to thriving. This podcast is for anyone who wants to learn, grow, to get tips and tricks about how to inspire you to become the person you want to be, and get clarity about exactly what you want in life. This is also the place to be if you want to be lifted up and encouraged to go out and do great work in the world. What has happened in your past does not have to define who you are today or who you become in the future. And in fact, what has happened to you in the past should, can, and will shape who you want to be. This podcast is also about bringing people together. It's about connecting all of you, helping you identify where you are in your process. What do you need to feel more engaged and alive in your life? More connected to the people in your circle? This is a community of those who are looking to improve our world in the way that is most meaningful to them. Why is this important? Because how we show up really matters. Bringing more service, kindness, and love into the world is critical right now. There were so many great quotes for today, so we have a couple more than usual. And I guess that's really an indication of how prevalent this topic is right now. The first quote is, "There is simply no winning with a narcissist. He will treat you so horribly that you will become withdrawn and depressed, and then he'll turn around and say, 'You're no fun anymore. You're always so depressed. I need to be with someone more positive,'" by Susan Williams. And "The best way to upset a narcissist is by ignoring him," by J.B. Snow. The third quote is, "Narcissists are all about image. They create a false self for the external world to see, which often comes across as charming, moralistic, kind, considerate, and, quote, perfect. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, they are the world's biggest hypocrites. They will pathologically lie, cheat, verbally assault, and completely destroy their family with zero remorse. What you see is not what you get behind closed doors." And this comes from Healing After a Narcissist. Also, nobody gets more upset than a narcissist who is accused of something they absolutely did. This comes from the site notsalmon.com. And finally, when a toxic person can no longer control you, they will try to control how others see you. This misinformation will feel unfair, but stay above it, trusting that other people will eventually see the truth just like you did, by Jill Blakeway. In this episode, you guessed it, we're going to talk about narcissism and narcissists. I've been doing a Facebook Live series for the last couple of months, which is also going to be on TikTok soon. And so I've been thinking a lot about the journey that so many of us face when dealing with narcissists. It's important to talk about because, as you can see with many of the quotes above, we often don't realize we are in a relationship with a narcissist. And certainly, way more often, others don't realize we are in a relationship with a narcissist. Now, this can be any kind of relationship: friendship, coworker, parent, or intimate partner. In my experience, they are all difficult for different reasons. However, the more intimate the relationship, the more damaging it ends up being. And more importantly, the harder it gets to extricate yourself from the relationship. The process can take much longer and need way more strategy than you think it might. It's really important to understand that narcissism happens on a spectrum, and we all fall on that spectrum somewhere. A little narcissism can be healthy. What we're talking about here, though, is pathological narcissism that's happening at the extreme end of the spectrum. If you're curious about what's at the other end of this spectrum, it's called egoism. And I recommend you follow psychologist Dr. Craig Malkin. He's an author, therapist, and teacher out of Harvard, and has some great information regarding both narcissism and egoism. I've put his website in the show notes. To the narcissist, this is a game, and the ultimate prize, according to the narcissist, is engagement, getting you to engage while they try to control and manipulate everything you do. So the key is not to play the game. Now, this might not be completely possible given the relationship with your narcissist. If the narcissist is your boss, then you have to engage with them. If the narcissist is your ex, and in particular you are quote-unquote co-parenting, which, by the way, is impossible to do with a narcissist, you have no choice but to engage. Now, there are lots and lots of ways, lots of tips and tricks that will allow you to minimize your communication and therefore mitigate the impact that your narcissist has on your communication, and really, it de-escalates the stress involved when your narcissist wants to play this game. I highly recommend or invite you to check out the Facebook Live series that I've been doing, because each video will give you a specific idea or a tip or trick for how to manage dealing with your narcissist in a way that will help keep you sane. Just like the cycle of abuse, there is a cycle with narcissists. Make no mistake, the narcissist is abusing you. There are 3 stages in the cycle of narcissism: honeymoon, tension building, and abuse escalation. We are going to use the work of Tanya Guam, MED and MA, and Barbara Herring, MA, LMFT. I want to thank them because their willingness to allow people to share their work with attribution helps to more clearly explain the cycle. When we understand the cycle, we are more able to acknowledge the situation we're in and ultimately successfully make changes. I've put where you can find their work in the show notes. They use the word victim in this document and throughout their explanations, and therefore I will carry that specific language forward in the podcast. Please note that many people, including me, that have survived and successfully left a narcissist consider themselves survivors, not victims. This can be a really important distinction in your healing journey. If you found yourself in a relationship with a narcissist, I invite you to use whatever term works best for you. The first stage is the honeymoon stage, and the most well-known symptom of this is love bombing. That's become a very common term in recent years. As part of this stage, the narcissist will idealize their victim. It's really grooming them, making the victim feel like they can trust the narcissist. There are lots of grand gestures here: expensive dates, gifts, weekend getaways. Also, in the honeymoon stage, there is lots of flattery, generosity, and putting you on a pedestal. For me, one of these first steps in this stage was the sign of early commitment. Now, that often should be a red flag to you. It's okay to have a natural progression in a relationship that takes time and each partner settles into. Extreme commitment often isn't that healthy. If you find yourself saying, "Is this too soon?" regardless of how much time you spend together, whether you're taking a vacation, moving in together, getting a pet, getting engaged, and on, if you're asking yourself the question, "Is this too soon?" it probably is. The narcissist may be trying to rush you into a commitment that is then harder to get out of. They definitely can make you doubt leaving once you have more connection with them through a house or a pet, kids, marriage. As part of this commitment stage, there's a lot of testing of boundaries. And once those boundaries are breached, that's when gaslighting occurs. A narcissist will spend a lot of time justifying their behavior. They may apologize, but it may not actually feel like an apology. In the next stage, which is tension building, this is where the narcissist starts to really mess with the victim and they start to devalue you. It often happens slowly. For many, you end up like the frog. I had a really close friend explain this analogy to me a few years ago, and it's so fitting. The story goes that when preparing frog legs, You put the frog in a pot of cold water and ever so slightly turn up the heat. The frog doesn't notice, and by the time the water is boiling and too hot for the frog to do anything, it's too late for the frog to act. This is how it goes with a narcissist. After love bombing you and convincing how amazing you are, and by the way, you are amazing, they start to criticize, demean, insult, degrade, and even can call you names. Sometimes they use humor to do these things. This is really where the gaslighting heats up. Since they've been testing your boundaries already, this is where they will actively start to push and break them. You are the frog. This is also where the gaslighting really starts to make you feel like you're crazy. You start to doubt your own reality. One of the worst things, in my opinion, that happens in this stage is that the narcissist will use your increasing emotional distress to attract sympathy from others and justify their abusive behavior. You may have heard me say, you never know what's going on behind closed doors. This is such a vulnerable statement for me to say. To the outside world, I looked really angry. It looked like I was mean to him. No one had any idea what was really going on privately. And there is so much confusion, you may not even realize yourself what is happening. You certainly don't recognize yourself. You don't understand. You feel awful all the time, and you can't figure out what to do, how to do it, or even why you're in this place. This is how the narcissist wants you to feel, completely off balance, because then they continue to control your narrative. And it's easier for them to maintain power and control in the relationship when they're controlling your narrative. The final stage in the cycle is called abuse escalation, and this is where the narcissist discards you. This stage is incredibly difficult for the victim because by now, the narcissist has generally done a very good job of convincing you, gaslighting you, that everything that they do to you is your fault. And but for you, their life would be perfect. So the narcissist will behave in all these ways. They will act with cruelty, coercive force, which does not have to be physical, rage. They escalate any form of abuse that you're experiencing. They commit significant betrayals. They constantly are invalidating your responses. And certainly they're blaming you all the time. And these acts come directly from Guam and Herring's work as well. One of the things that is happening in this stage is that the narcissist isn't managing their own shame and insecurities, and there is a lot of projection. One point I want to make about the rage is that it can be silent. And when it's silent, it can be very hard to identify as rage. An early clue, that they might be completely filled with rage is when you put them in a position of having to feel their own feelings. I found that if I got angry for him, he conveniently didn't have to feel those feelings. When I stopped doing that, by recognizing that the problem wasn't mine and I didn't have to fix it, the rage became palpable. In this last stage, it's very likely that the narcissist will start to groom and therefore love bomb a new victim. This causes them to feel in control and empowered again. So one of the things I want to make clear is that this cycle is very subversive. Remember the frog? You often don't even realize what's happening to you. You know something doesn't feel right, and it can really make you feel like you're crazy and wrong. It's strange because throughout this process, you move so far away from who you thought you were that you don't even recognize yourself any longer. It's so incredibly damaging and insidious. If any of what I've said today is making you stop and think, then consider that there's a chance you are in a relationship with a narcissist. So what can you do? You all know I always try to provide practical tips so that when you're ready, you can do something. For me, I've learned that we can change anything in our lives when we decide to act. I'll just remind you all that I am not a therapist, so my tips and tricks come from my own lived experience as well as what I've seen others go through. This is a really vulnerable place because I'm going to give you very specific personal situations, as I've already done a couple of times already in this podcast. The first tip I can give you is to stop trying to fix everything, especially if it feels like nothing you do is good enough. Early on in our relationship, we went to see a therapist. And in front of the therapist, I was told that if I just didn't get mad, then he could work on the problems. So I did that. I worked really hard on myself to just, quote, not get mad. And after about 4 months, with visible improvement on my part, which the therapist confirmed and acknowledged the effort and change I'd put in, I was told that it wasn't that I got mad. It was that I was always trying to talk about the issues when the timing was wrong. So I went back and I practiced for several months, getting the timing right. Back to the therapist, a supposed safe space, where I was told that it wasn't the timing. It was that I didn't infuse enough humor into our discussions about the issues. See how the target is always moving? And the result of that was that no matter what I did, it was never going to be good enough. Do you have someone in your life that makes you feel like no matter how hard you work or what you do, it's simply never good enough? If so, then really consider you might have a narcissist. When you come to this realization, the antidote is to stop trying to fix everything. This can be hard because the narcissist chose you specifically because they knew that you're a kind, conscientious, caring person who wants others around them to be happy and comfortable. So it really feels like you're going against your inherent nature. You aren't. It is perfectly okay to continue to be that kind, conscientious, caring person. Two people that aren't going to twist those traits and use them against you. I want to note here that in this case, he was manipulating the therapist too. Because in front of the therapist, the narcissist knows that it gives their complaints more credibility when they're done in front of another person who doesn't deny the narcissist's experience. So the narcissist especially likes it when that person is in a position of authority. Recognize that so often people don't speak up when they're uncomfortable, when they're still learning, or they think it isn't their place. And the narcissist really takes advantage of this to keep the manipulation high. They work very hard to include others in shaming you and making you feel wrong. This is another red flag to be aware of. And for those of you that are seeing a relationship that doesn't appear to be functional, remember to really look at what's going on. Because on its face, it may appear one way, but in reality, it may be something completely different. Again, you never know what's going on behind closed doors and how that may translate to the outside world. The next tip I can give you is that to the narcissist, this is a game. Remember, we always keep coming back to this is a game. And I know how horrible that sounds when you are the one being victimized. The narcissist is looking for engagement with you, and when you don't give it to them, they get bored and want to move on. So not engaging is key. And also knowing that it might take some time of not engaging to get them to want to move on. The easiest way I found to do this is to agree without really agreeing. Use gray and yellow rocking when communicating. I have a Facebook Live and YouTube video on this topic, so I highly recommend you go back and watch. You don't respond to them right away. And one really effective tactic is to just say, okay. It's very difficult for someone to continue to push you when all you say is, okay. And if they try to, that's a big clue that they are not a very reasonable person who's willing to acknowledge and accept your boundaries. In line with communication tips, if the narcissist is using third parties against you, like a therapist, the kid's teachers, the legal system, saying, quote, "I'm doing the best I can," end quote, to the third party is highly effective. You learn to start talking past the narcissist and only to the other parties in the conversation. When you say this to a reasonable, normal person, "I'm doing the best I can," and you are legitimately doing the best you can. This doesn't work if you're using it incongruously or in a way to avoid your own personal responsibility. So if you say to a normal person, a reasonable person, "I'm doing the best I can," even if they don't see the situation in the same light that you do, they will soften. They will pause. They will consider what you are saying. If they don't, and they continue to push and push you, then they have the same or similar boundary issues as the narcissist, and you will make little headway. Lots of people, thankfully, haven't had an experience with a narcissist like you have. So if they don't get it, it's not that they're bad people. It can mean that they have no frame of reference, and they may not be able to get what's happening. They've never experienced it before. If that's the case, and you are working with a third party, like a therapist or in the legal system, it may be time to consider trying to find someone new. Someone that does get it. Please reach out to me if you would like some additional support, would like me to come speak to your organization, would like to have your school book me to speak to students, would like to be a guest on the show, or have any feedback you'd like to share. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to today's episode on narcissism and the cycle of narcissistic abuse. Admittedly, this episode has taken me longer to write and release. I think the reason for that is because while this is a topic that has so much to it, it's also reminded me of the vulnerable position you can be in when in a relationship with a narcissist. I've tried to make this really digestible in a reasonable amount of time, and as well provide you with some hope that you can get through this. Please know that there are so many ways to identify your specific situation, even though in this case, I chose to narrow it down and really focus on the work of Guam and Herring. And also, I hope that you find the practical tips useful, ones that you can start practicing right away to see what kind of responses you're going to get. Please see my Facebook Live videos that are also on YouTube, because each one breaks down a specific strategy for dealing with your narcissist, one step at a time. Remember, there are so many resources out there about narcissism and narcissists, and how to tell if you are in any kind of relationship with a narcissist. If you think you are, I invite you to learn as much as you can. And as always, please reach out to me if I can support you further on this topic. I appreciate you sharing these episodes. This podcast is a powerful resource for anyone that is looking to make changes in their lives. So please, please, please help me grow by sharing, liking, and subscribing. There will be new episodes on the second and fourth Wednesday every month. I promise that every episode I'm going to show up and be real to help support you in your individual journey. Please see how to connect with me in the show notes or go to my website at locatecoaching.com. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll see you soon.